Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the February 21st, 2024 Worcester Township Board of Supervisors business meeting. Would you please join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance? My name is Rick DiLello. I'm the chairman of the board. To my left is Lou Betts, who is our vice chair. To my right is Steve Quigley, who is our third member. Over on the side table, we have John Everts, who's our township engineer, and we have Wendy McKenna, who is our township solicitor. On the back table, we have Sean Halbum, who is our township manager. First and foremost, does anybody have any informational items for the board this evening?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this meeting is being recorded for future broadcast. Also, the Board of Supervisors has met in executive session on January 24th to discuss litigation, on February 1st to discuss personnel, and on February 19th to discuss real estate litigation and personnel. No discussions or no decisions were made. Just also for knowledge sake, I attended a meeting hosted by Skip-Ack EMS earlier this month, just for information about their operations and financial needs.
Yep. Okay. Those items are, I guess we can handle them one at a time. The first amendment to the agenda would be under the motions. Item B, the motion to authorize payment in the amount of $129,972. There's a typo there, and that figure should be,
It should be $65,207.70. It's actually a reduction.
So we would need a motion and a second to amend the agenda to reflect that revision.
Okay. Does anyone want to make that motion? I can actually make that motion. I'll make a motion that we amend the agenda, item B, to reflect the correct dollar amount of $65,207.70. Is that correct, John?
Yes.
Okay. Somebody's got to second it.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any public comment regarding the motion on the floor? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Aye. Motion passes. Next item.
Next item is, again, just a matter of just housekeeping. Under public hearings, there's a item listed waiver of land development variety club. That is actually not a public hearing. That should be moved to other business on your agenda.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion that we move the waiver of land development for the variety club presently under public hearing to other business.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any public comment regarding the motion on the floor? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Motion passes.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. Okay, folks, so first item up is public comment. I do ask that you limit your public comment to 5 minutes. Does anybody have any public comment for the board this evening? Christopher?
My name is Christopher DePaul, and I own Whitehall Firms at 1616 Whitehall Road. I just had a question. We've been going back and forth, the township, Sean, in reference to some items that are taking place in preparation of. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry.
Then just make sure the green light is on so that we get you on the recording there.
Okay, I'm sorry. We've been in preparation of getting some things done on the property, and the township has been out and going over a few things, and I just had to clarify something from our end in our position with the township about some information that was conveyed through Sean. And I just wanted to find out, Sean, as you're aware of.
It's Christopher, direct to the board?
I'm sorry, the board
No
is-
worries. You can, I understand that you're referencing things
I'm
that
trying to find out if we were actually ever issued a permit to do the work that we were doing on the site
Okay,
in order to get everything in line to make sure everything's 100% so we can get our documents resubmitted 100%.
okay.
So my question, is it all right to ask to Sean?
No, you can
Okay,
direct
so
it to the board.
So I'm a little confused because Sean had stopped out and informed us that we did not have a permit on the site. I informed them we did because I did pick it up. I thought, and sometimes I have a lot going on, I made a mistake. He informed us that he went back to his office and we still didn't have a permit, and he told us to stop, and I did then informed him, Sean, I did pick up a permit. And at that point, I had to send him a picture of the permit for the work that we were doing. Now, granted, there were some issues with what he said we were supposed to be able to do or not, but my question is, in order for us to move forward, did we ever have a permit or not? And as I went back and forth with this and Sean on numerous times is, he informed us we did not. And then it was we did, because he revoked it. My question is, how do I know if I had a permit or not, and I have to be able to proceed with getting documents finalized in order to submit back to CKS and the township to continue?
Sure. So a couple things. We're going to need to look into parts of that, Christopher, for you to find out. And ultimately, there'll be two parts to that. The first is to understand if, in fact, there was a permit, and if we revoked it, ultimately, does that mean we need to issue a new permit, or there's some other process there? And then ultimately making sure that anything we do issue is the correct permit for the correct work that you want to do, so that you can provide for CKS whatever documentation is needs to be in companion with that ultimately. I don't want to take it down the rabbit hole of did we, didn't we, without having all those details, and I don't necessarily want to put anybody on the spot right here until I've had a chance and the board's had a chance to take a look at it fully. But at the end of the day, we want to make sure, first and foremost, you have a permit and the right permit, and if there's any documentation that we need to sort of support that you know exactly what that is, so that you can have the right permit, or, hey, you can't do that and here's why you can't, or here's the process that you need to proceed forward with in order to do the work that you want to do and have everything in full compliance. It sounds like that's what you want to do. It sounds like that's obviously what we would
Yes,
want to have take place.
We don't want to keep on going back. It's and I just want to make sure I have everything correct.
No, and certainly coming before this board is the right thing to do in that regard, so that we can make sure that we're hearing it as well, and we can just make sure that we get it all squared away. Steve, did you have a question or a comment?
No, I just think that, once again, I know it is to get work done, and you have contractors waiting and people lined up, so if we can get back to them maybe sometime in the near future, I don't want to say tomorrow or the next day, a little research into it, but
Quickly.
an appropriate time frame rather than letting the guy hang out there, I think that'd be appreciated.
No, I appreciate it.
Sure, and Christopher, we certainly have all your information. I'm sure if you've had communications with the township, so we'll be able to get all the details and get it squared away.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. I appreciate you coming in and being patient with us. Does anybody? Hey, Bob. Good evening.
Bob Andorn, Worcester. I'm here to follow up on some comments that I made in December's meeting and then in January's meeting, specifically regarding the documentation that the board had and approving the budget for 2024 from December's meeting. And I questioned whether you guys had that documentation before you, where it was present. And you told me that you would look into that. And then in January, I raised some issues specifically regarding some interest income, as well as sewer fund issues, and bring it to your attention that the sewer fund, according to my estimation, lost $1 million in 2023, which would have been approximately 50% of what you had available left over. The numbers tonight suggest that I was correct, at least in saying that you spent $1 million more than you had earned. Therefore, you lost $1 million in that budget activity. And in January's meeting, you told me that you would look into that. So I'm here to find out on those two issues, have you looked into it? And if you have looked into it, what have you found?
So I did look into it, Bob. I can share with you, I'll say the easier one first, if I could, is the spending that we had, the additional $1 million, were for capital expenditures. There were two, we defined them as ARPA funds, but we got federal funding in, and forgive me if it's 2021 and 22, we got $545,000, roughly $1,080,000 in federal funding as part of COVID relief funds, and the $1 million that we spent in capital expenditures in 2023 was from that additional $1 million that was received from the federal government for those 2 years. So they showed up as receipts in 2021 and 2022. They were capital expenditures going out in 2023, ultimately. That's where the bulk of the spending took place. In addition to that, one of the items had an insurance claim that was associated with it, so there was expenditures going out, and I believe the number was $400,000 that's also being recouped of that $1 million in expenditures because there was an insurance claim associated with one of the capital projects that was done, which was the Meadowood pumping station. So that's the item relative to the expenditures and where the money specifically came from that was allocated for those two items. In terms of the other question, I don't know how the information got incorrectly posted to the website. You had some questions as to what information had gotten out. I don't know how it was incorrect. I am comfortable that we had correct information. We had a budget conversation in September, in October, and November. In November, we had correct information was in the back as you had raised an issue and we didn't have the right information in front of us here in December, but it was correct in November. So we did, as a board, have correct information. We also, in December, pulled up on the screen. I assumed it was the website, so we had the correct information.
That was I apologize, that was incorrect. Because what you pulled up and gave to me, I then showed you was incorrect. And so, you know what, I guess I'll just file right to know and get the information on what was given to you and when it was given to you, and then somebody can document that you in fact had it, then I'll accept that you had it. But if you didn't have it, then we'll have a different discussion later on in the future. I guess I'll do the same thing about what you just told me about these expenditures and income for the sewer fund.
That's fine. And in fact, certainly the township staff would be happy to sit down with you separately. If you don't want to file a right to know, if you just want to schedule a time to go through that with them, that's fine as well. I mean, they certainly will make themselves available for you to go through that. You're entitled to that, and that's fine as well. But however you would like to do that is certainly your prerogative.
Okay, thank you.
Quick follow-up to Rick's comments. I think all three supervisors were stunned when you found about that bill that we had with the Meadowood deal. You know, it's a deal that the past administration years ago worked out, and the board sitting here now wouldn't have done the same deal. So we're living with the past administration's sins. And we were really caught off guard with that. And it was a very big expense for the township sewer fund. So we just had to wait to recoup the money from the insurance company. We weren't sure how they were going to handle that. So that was sort of the sticking point there with the sewer fund, which made it really look bad. But as we said, we've recouped most of the money back.
Again, once I see all of that, I haven't had access to any of that. So once I see that and kind of able to review it, then I'll formulate some additional questions if appropriate.
Fair enough. Thank you, Bob. Does anybody else have any public comment for the board this evening? Okay, seeing none, we will move forward. We'll start with our official action items tonight and then our consent agenda. Does any board member wish to remove any items from our consent agenda tonight?
No, sir.
Okay, then I'll entertain a motion.
I have some questions, Rick. I believe receiving this checkbook ledger 5 minutes before the meeting, I believe we do pay the bills of the township, utilities, insurance, payroll. I have a lot of questions on a lot of these things, so I know you can't do a partial. In the meeting minutes, in another business, I made a comment about having an investigation on what Bob Andorch said and whether, I don't believe it was poor bookkeeping, I believe it was poor presentation. It was wrong on the website, that is a fact. I don't know how you want to handle this. If you want to pass it, I'm going to vote a different way.
What part aren't you, I guess I don't understand what you're saying.
Well, if you want me to pay the bills.
No. So we have to approve the payment of the bills. You're saying you don't want to make the motion
Correct.
for that?
Correct.
Okay, that's fine. Then I can make the motion on the consent agenda if you'd rather not do that.
You guys do that. I'll vote no.
Mr. Chairman, not knowing Mr. Betts's comments on it, can we just postpone this to next month? We figure out what's going on. We can't do that. Sean's ever shaking his head. You know, I don't know if my fellow supervisor has a question about some of the items, the billing process, without taking up a lot of time. I think it should be addressed. If we can postpone it to a later date, I don't have a problem with that.
That's postponing paying our bills by 30 days, which could incur issues for some of the bills.
Typically,
You guys can pass it.
I don't know, I signed them all today. I mean, I went, certainly I'm comfortable with the
I'm
bills.
not challenging that we pay our bills. I'm challenging that I may not agree with some of the bills that are being paid, but I know we have to pay our payroll and our insurance or utilities. How do you want me to handle this? You want me to just make a motion to pass it with concerns? I can do that if you choose. I'm going to put it in question, but again, you guys are having a problem with this, but I'll make a motion that we approve the consent agenda for the treasurer's report bill payment, and again, a correction on the business minutes and other business on January 17th.
So what do you want to correct on the business meeting
In other
minutes?
business, I requested that, and again, I said it, and it's on tape, that we find an outsider maybe or somebody in investigation on something to satisfy Mr. Andorn, because he's going to continually, I believe he has a due right to understand, was it posted, was it not posted? Did we have the minutes? Because again, that binder's sitting here. He had other evidence that was in the back. I mean, there's a lot of, I mean, that's an official $5 million budget. I mean, you know, we're playing with big money here. So the correction was I want an outside investigator to identify, just to pacify him, that what did the events happen? Was it poor presentation? I want to know myself.
Okay.
I'll pay the bills of the township. I want a correction on the minutes that I asked for an investigation and the treasurer's report. So I'll make a motion that we pass it. And again, I'm just identifying I have concerns. So I'll make that motion.
Motion made to pay the bills, and I'll second it.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any public comment regarding the motion that's on the floor? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Okay. All right, so next item we have under the motion section is we have a motion to authorize preparation and advertisement of an amendment to Chapter 41, Fire Prevention of the Township Code. We get some information on that?
Yes, there's a memo included in the public meeting packet from the fire marshal. This would amend Chapter 41, Fire Prevention in the Township Code to require the uniform color coding of fire hydrants. The colors would associate with the gauge or size hose that would affix to those separate fire apparatus. The fire marshal recommends this as a way for firefighters to quickly assess what size hoses need to be linked up in the event of a fire. I believe that also it's mentioned in there that these color coding standards were set by North Penn Water Authority.
Okay. Does anybody have any question regarding the memo or the specific motion that's been put before us?
No.
Anything, Steve? Okay.
I'll make a motion that we approve the authorized preparation and advertising of the amendment, Chapter 41, Fire Prevention, Township Code.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any public comment regarding the motion that's on the floor? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion passes. Next item up is a motion to authorize payment to DJ Vinciotti Construction Company, Inc. in the amount of $65,207.70 for the Weber Road Culvert Replacement, contract number 7200-204A. John, do you have any additional information you can provide for us on this, please?
So this is the work associated with the Weber Road culvert replacement. The majority of the work has to do with the moving of a Pico gas main. That's what the next item as well is with. So we're requesting a payment of $65,207.70 to Vinciotti.
And this was part of the original bid work, John, or is this in addition to the original bid?
That number includes the change order for letter C. So the remainder of that would be a part of the original contract amount.
Any board member have any question regarding this particular item for John?
Nope.
Okay. Somebody want to make a motion?
Make a motion that we approve authorization of payment to DJ Picotti, a construction company, of the $65,207.70.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any public comment regarding the motion that's on the floor? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion passes. So next up, John, if you could sort of follow up, this is the $29,000. It's going to be a motion to authorize a change order in the amount of $29,602. And if we could get some more information on that, please.
Thank you, Board Chair. So this is with regard to the bypass pumping for the work associated with the gas main relocation. Originally, Pico was asking for bypass pumping for them to do their work to start January 2nd. It's now February 21st, and we anticipate that work to be done in the next few days.
And my understanding is we're also going back to Pico in an effort to get Pico to sort of participate in that.
That is correct.
Like moving City Hall. Yeah. And do you have questions for John or questions? It's a change order that in some ways was driven by Pico, and we need to pay it, but we're also trying to recoup from Pico.
I understand. So I'll make a motion that we authorize the change order of the amount of, again, the correct amount is $29,602.
Correct.
For DJ Picotti and construction for items listed.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any public comment regarding the motion that's on the floor? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. So are we good with taking the resolution where it is for this next item? Wendy, I know we moved the waiver down. I just want to make sure I'm doing everything. Fine. Okay. So next up, we've got a resolution 2024-06, which is going to be a resolution concerning an application for grant revenue from the Montgomery County 2040 grant. Sean, what do we got here?
Yeah, I'll go provide a little background.
It's all yours, John. All right, even better.
All right, so this is an MS4, which stands for Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System Project for stream restoration at Zacharias Creek. It will consist of approximately 1,100 lineal feet of stream bank restoration between Green Hill Road and Hollow Road. The exact location is to be determined during design. The project is required to meet the MS4 pollutant reductions for the current 5-year PA-DEP cycle. Worcester Township is part of the Skippack Creek Alliance, which consists of Towmenson, Hatfield, Skippack, Lower Providence, and Worcester Townships. The estimated cost of the stream bank restoration project is $750,000. This current grant request will be for the maximum amount allowed of $350,000. The amount that Worcester will be responsible for is 16.5% of any costs not covered by the grant, and while the other municipalities are responsible for the remainder. Additionally, we are looking for other grant opportunities to help the township pay down the costs.
And in the simplest sense, you just need our approval so that you can submit the grant application.
That's correct. I just wanted to give a background.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions? And this is part of the, we need to do the 20% reduction as part of the, is that tied to that whole consortium? And
that's correct. DEP's permit requirements are the 5-year permit that we have.
Gotcha. Okay. Does anybody have any questions for John regarding this particular application?
Nope.
Okay. Does somebody want to make a motion?
So we're going to make a motion to approve a resolution of the 2040 grant. Do you need a dollar amount?
Not a dollar amount, just resolution 2024-06.
2024-06. I'll make that motion.
I will second that motion.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any public comment regarding the motion that's on the floor? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Okay, now we're up to public hearings. We're going to start with the conditional use continuance of the conditional use application for the Variety Club. I'm going to hand it over to you, Wendy, so you can take us into the hearing process.
Yes, thank you. If we could just pause for a moment and pause the transcript for just a moment.
Oh, okay, thanks.
Steve's on. You know,
surgery, but they're scheduling in April because there's no time for surgery. You gotta go in there and take out 60%.
Yeah, you can hand them out. I mean, we're just going to, Steve took a quick detour, and we're going to, and they're all the same, right? Everything's identical? Excellent.
homework. He's getting homework.
Gotcha.
Oh, pretty picture. I do. I got bad eyes. I can see what I'm talking about. See what I'm looking at. What am I looking at?
I can't read it either. I don't know if I can read it on the big paper either.
I got it.
Do you have one for us?
Let me ask you a quick. Are any of these fields?
Are we already?
No. Thanks. Some of these fields are.
I do not believe so. I won't need that for this. Steve, you good? We're all set. Thank you, Wendy.
So at this point, we are going to temporarily adjourn the public meeting, and we are going to open the public hearing regarding the conditional use application of Variety Club concerning the property at 950 Pot Shop Road. This is a continued hearing. We were previously here in January, and the applicant is represented by Mr. Jonas. He had the testimony had completed of one witness, and he is now going to move forward. Just as a reminder to everybody, this is a public hearing. We have a court reporter here who takes down the testimony. There will be witnesses who will be providing testimony, explaining exhibits, and the board will be receiving this information in its quasi-judicial capacity, and ultimately making a determination with the request for conditional use. I would request that there will be an opportunity for those who have been given party status to ask questions of any witnesses, and ultimately to make statements regarding the application if they wish to do so. But I will ask that no one would interrupt while Mr. Jonas is proceeding with his case, or while the board is asking questions, so that we can proceed in the manner that's appropriate for a public hearing. And with that, I will turn the floor over to Mr. Jonas.
Thank you. Good evening. Nice to be back. We have two more witnesses tonight in support of the request for the conditional use relating to the illumination of the field. Our first witness is Michael Boker. He's a civil engineer. He's going to have very brief testimony just locating the field. And then our final witness will be our lighting expert, who will give you the real details at the heart of this application. So with your permission, we do have the booklet's been passed out. There's one additional exhibit. It is an aerial map that locates two of the persons who spoke at the previous hearing, just for the board to have some context of the location. As you heard from our first witness, there's been a considerable reach out to the neighbors, including a meeting at Variety. Variety has, and I think we heard plaudits from other neighbors about how the CEO and others from Variety have reached out over time to the neighbors, and that is part of the history and legacy of Variety. So with that, we'd have Mr. Boker sworn to provide testimony.
I do. Michael Boker, B-O-W-K-E-R.
Good evening, Mr. Boker. I'm going to direct your attention to Exhibit A7. Is that, in fact, your curriculum vitae?
It is.
You're a registered professional engineer?
Yes, I am.
And at the bottom of the page of the summary of your CV, the light is on.
It's on.
Oh.
Yeah.
You can hear me? I'm good?
Yeah, the acoustics aren't great. We just ask you if you can sort of lean into the microphone when you're talking so we get you captured properly.
So at the bottom of A7, it states that you provided testimony before numerous municipal zoning hearing boards, planning commissions, board of supervisors, commissioners, in conjunction with court cases, and has been accepted as an expert in the field of civil engineering and land planning. That's correct?
Yes, it is.
In the interest of time, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, I would offer Mr. Boker as an expert in civil engineering and land planning, subject to any questions you or the solicitor might have.
I don't have any issue with that. Wendy, are you okay with that?
Yes. I think he's accepted as an expert.
Okay.
Mr. Boker, what has been your role and responsibilities with regard to the conditional use application that before the board tonight?
So our firm was engaged to develop the development plans for the Variety Club for the proposed athletic field improvements.
This is we're only here on the conditional use application discussing the illumination of one field. Is that correct?
Correct.
But there is a two-phase project, and the board will hear that later this evening after the hearing is adjourned with regard to a waiver of land development. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
So let's take a look at Exhibit A4. Tell us what Exhibit A4, your role in the preparation of that, and what that shows with regard to the conditional use, the illumination of the sports field.
Sure. So our firm prepared this plan, this Exhibit A4, And what it is a plan illustrating the proposed site improvements for Phase 1 and Phase 2. The field that we propose to provide the lighting for is part of Phase 1 and is centrally located on the site. The site is approximately 78 acres, and the field, you can see, is the darker green area in the middle of the site.
And what is involved with Phase 2 of the project?
Phase 2, to the west of the proposed synthetic turf field, which would be constructed in Phase 1, there would be located a baseball field, and to the southeast of the turf field, there would be another natural grass multi-purpose field. In between that field and the field from Phase 1, we would provide additional parking area.
Please turn to Exhibit A8 and tell us what that shows.
A8 is a rendering of the proposed Phase 1 field improvements. That includes the field lighting standards. You will see 4 of those located, 2 on each side of the field.
And so what is proposed, the field, and what are the structures right below the field that's shown on A8?
Those are bleachers.
And approximately what's the capacity of the bleachers?
Approximately, we would have, I believe it is 84 seats in those 2. The actual plan now has 2 sets of bleachers split to either side, with total 84 seats.
How many, sorry?
84.
Is the proposed lighted field located in close proximity to any neighboring homes or residential area?
I don't believe so. The closest residence is approximately 630 feet from the lighting pole, and that would be to the northwest of the field.
Is there any existing buffering between the lighted field and any neighboring residences?
Yes, in particular that site, and also to the east of the site, there's a large wooded mass between this field and Pot Shop Road. And the buffer between our property and the houses that front Horseshoe Drive, there is an existing vegetative buffer that runs along that property line and continues down the western boundary line.
I'd like you to turn to Exhibit A17. That's the additional exhibit that I referred to just a few minutes ago. That's an aerial map that shows the location of the proposed lighted field. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
And it's sort of in the lower center. The field is in the lower center of this map. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then does this map then, is it annotated to show the location of 2 of the persons who spoke at the previous hearing?
It is.
Those are all the questions I have of Mr. Boker. Again, our next witness is Mrs. Zoller, the lighting expert.
Board members, do you have any questions for this witness?
I do not. Steve, do you have any questions for Lou?
Okay, and I believe that Mr. Andorn was granted party status in this application. Mr. Andorn, do you have any questions of this witness? Thank you.
Our next witness, thank you, Michael.
Yes. Robert, middle initial G, last name Zoller, Z-O-E-L-L-E-R.
Good evening, Mrs. Zoller.
Good evening.
What is your business or profession?
I'm sorry,
Yes.
Mark. Was he sworn in? Did I miss that?
Oh,
sorry.
Mr. Mangiardi is very, very subtle.
Yes, I'm a technical consultant for Musco Sports Lighting.
And what firm are you affiliated with?
Musco Sports Lighting.
You have experience testifying on sports lighting before municipal boards?
Yes, I do.
I'm going to direct your attention to Exhibit A9. Is that your CV?
Yes, it is.
And does that state a series of places where you have testified as an expert in sports lighting?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, subject to your questions, I offer Mr. Zoller as an expert in sports lighting.
Thank you, Mark. I don't have any issues with accepting him as an expert. Wendy, do you have any concerns, or other board members have any concerns? Okay, well,
He is accepted as an expert.
So I'd like to get in briefly into the background on lighting systems and direct your attention to Exhibit 10 in the booklet. This says evolution of glare control technology. As you know, the lighting of the turf field is the heart of this conditional use application. Could you explain Exhibit 10, and if it would make it easier, and in the interest of time, proceed with Exhibit 11, Exhibit 12, and Exhibit 13 with regard to what those exhibits show and how that relates to this application, and particularly with regard to the township's lighting ordinance and concern for nearby neighbors.
Yes, I'd be happy to. Exhibit A10 talks about the evolution of glare control technology. When we look from left to right on the exhibit, to the left, we're showing a fixture, typical fixture design for sports lighting in the 1970s, which was basically the state of the art back then, just purely a floodlight. The purpose to get as much light as you can into the area that you want to illuminate, but being a floodlight, the light goes everywhere. It projects upward, outward, and downward. Over the years, there have been improvements in the control and in the directionality of the lighting. You could see as you move from left to right, in 1989, facets were added in the bottom of the fixture to redirect the light down onto the field, which improved the amount of light on the field by 65% and reduced glare by 25%. As we moved into the 80s, they began to add external visors, and those varied over the years, became more and more larger, more effective, and finally the proposed lighting that we have is the lighting fixture that's all the way to the right, 2013. That is what's called light structure TLC, or total light control. It's an LED fixture, and it's a full cutoff fixture. And as you can see, that fixture is actually on, just like all the other fixtures in the exhibit, but you cannot see the light because it is a full cutoff fixture, and the lighting is tucked in underneath, and we'll show you that in a little more detail. If we can go to Exhibit A11, I'm just briefly going to go show you, this is the proposed lighting fixture for the field. If you look at the picture of the fixture, you could see the right picture shows just a faint hint of lighting underneath the visor. Tucked up beneath and behind the visor is the actual LED light source. So by having it designed in this fashion, there are two things that we gain. Number one, we gain it as a full cutoff fixture, meaning there's no sky glow, there's no lighting projected upward from this fixture whatsoever. The second gain is the large shielding in front of the fixture. And what that does is that as you move away from the field, the greatest source of glare from a sports lighting fixture is your ability to see the light source inside of the fixture. As you move away, that large shield shields you from seeing that lighting source in the fixture, and it removes that great glare source as you would have in the older lighting technology. In the next exhibit, Exhibit A12, I'm sorry, I jumped exhibits. We'll go back to Exhibit A11, I'm sorry. Apologize for that. In Exhibit A11, the lighting fixture that you see is called the Musco OSQ LED luminaire. We've been asked to light two particular items on the site. The first is the field itself, which was the lighting fixture I just showed. The second is the parking area and the roadway leading up to the parking area. And this Musco OSQ LED luminaire is the luminaire that will be used. Again, it's another full cutoff fixture for those parking areas and for that roadway area. Here's the cut sheet of that. You can see it's a short pole, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but this is the cut sheet for that. Also contained as you would move through Exhibit 11 are the cut sheets as were requested previously by the engineer, the reviewing engineer, is the cut sheet for the LED 1200 luminaire, that 1200 watt luminaire, and the LED 1500 watt luminaire, the two fixtures that are being used for the field. So those are the detailed data sheets for those particular lighting fixtures, which were reviewed by the board experts. Moving to the next exhibit, A12. To give kind of a full picture of what I had shown in the evolution of the lighting technology, Exhibit A12, what we did was we set up the lighting fixtures, each one, as you saw in the previous exhibit, moving again from left to right. And what we're showing here is, number one, the efficiency of the fixture. The number of fixtures show the efficiency of the fixtures to light the same amount of area directly in front of each one of these lighting poles. So the 1977 technology on the far left, it took 5 1,500-watt fixtures to provide the same illumination, and you can see from the picture the amount of glare, how you have the large balls of light when you're looking up at the lighting fixtures. And moving from left to right on the exhibit, you see that the glare gets cut down in each step, and also you begin to see that the number of lighting fixtures, these are all 1,500-watt fixtures moving across from left to right. The number of fixtures also decreases because the efficiency is increasing as you're moving to left to right. And then the fixture that is just before the fixture completely to the right, that's in the red dashed line, is the proposed fixture. There are actually 2 1,500-watt fixtures there that are turned on, and those 2 1,500-watt fixtures provide the same amount of light as our 1977 5 fixtures, 1,500-watt fixtures. And you also can see that the glare now has been captured and is virtually gone. The fixture all the way to the right, and the reason I included this, is because there are a lot of LED sports lighting fixtures that are available today. And to say that you're using an LED sports lighting fixture, you do gain the efficiency, but if you don't have the design of the reflector to capture the light and to shield the lighting fixture, you basically revert back to what we had in 1977 as far as glare and what you would see when you're looking up at the fixture. So that's how much the lighting has improved. And just to make note, the one that we're proposing, which is to the left of the red dashed area, the one that's to the left of that is the lighting fixture that is on Methacton High School. So I just wanted to point that out to you. That was installed in 2014 when the LED luminaires were not available at that time. So that was the state-of-the-art technology back then.
Let's go to Exhibit 13A. Your lighting plans were reviewed by the Township Lighting Consultant, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And were the revised plans submitted in response to comments from the Township Lighting Consultant?
Yes, they were.
So take us through 13, Exhibit 13, and tell us specifically about the lights that are proposed for the variety sports field.
The first page in the booklet, which is not shown on the screen or on my boards, is just a summary sheet. And that just gives you a summary of all the lighting fixtures, the lighting that's proposed. So if you'd be so kind as to turn to the second sheet, the second sheet shows you the field. What we are proposing to light the field is 4 light poles. There are 4 70-foot light poles. There are 2 on the long side of the field on the one side, 2 on the long side of the field of the other. There are 8 lighting fixtures per pole. When I talked about, there's the 1,200-watt and the 1,500-watt. There are 7 1,500-watt fixtures on each pole, and there's 1 1,200-watt fixture. The 1,200-watt fixture is there aimed to the corner of the field to make a better cutoff than the 1,500-watt fixture. We've done everything we can to minimize any light spillage and control that lighting onto the field. So and the average maintained lighting on that field is 50-foot candles. Going to the next page on the exhibit, here we have the parking area. The parking area is going to be illuminated to an average of just under 2.5-foot candles, and we're utilizing 19 poles with 1 of the OSQ luminaires per pole, and they're all on 12-foot poles as are required by the ordinance. So we're meeting the ordinance not only on the field with the height of the poles on the field, but also now also in the parking area. So you can see the photometric distribution of the lighting through the parking area. And then the next page here we have the lighting distribution along the roadway. There are 11 poles, same fixture, same pole height, that illuminate the roadway that leads up to the field. Sorry. Now the next page, now we look at the impact of the lighting. What we've done is we've run the property line all around the field, and this sheet shows the horizontal foot candles measured at 3 feet above grade. Horizontal foot candles is, as the ordinance requires, that with the field lighting, we're not supposed to be more than 0.1 horizontal foot candles. The field lighting we are proposing along the entire length of the property line does not exceed 0.0 horizontal foot candles. So we are less than what's required for the field. In addition, what we've done is we've added in the parking area and the roadway. So what we're showing on this exhibit is not only the lighting from the field, we're showing the lighting from the parking area, we're showing the lighting from the roadway. And over the entire length of the property line, we have no values greater than 0.0 foot candles. Now, I will add, in calculating these values, number one, we have taken into account the elevation of the property line. So each one of these values is at 3 feet above the ground at the proper elevation of that point on the property line. So we've taken into account all of the ups and downs that you have topographically on the property as we went around the property line. Second thing we did was we did not take into account foliage, structures, buildings, anything that would be between all of the lighted areas and the property line. So this way, what we're doing is we're assuming there's absolutely nothing between the lighting and the property line. The next page, this is the vertical foot candles. The ordinance allows us to not be greater than 0.5 vertical foot candles. And what we do when we calculate the vertical foot candles, we don't just simply calculate vertical foot candles, we take the light meter and we calculate it by taking the meter and aiming it at the brightest bank of lights to set up an aiming point, and that simulates what your eye, if you're looking into a dark area and there's lighting, your eye is going to be drawn to whatever the brightest lighting would be in that area. So we set it up so that the line of sight is the directionality of the vertical readings that we're taking. Again, same parameters as we've just discussed, all taken into account. The highest vertical reading along the entirety of the property line is 0.0 foot candles. So in both cases, there is 0.0 foot candles of light spillage along the property line. We are well within the requirements of the lighting ordinance.
Let's go to Exhibit 14.
Yes.
Tell us what Exhibit 14 is.
Exhibit 14, as requested by the engineers, is the foundation parameters that are required for the field lighting poles. So in what the foundation for the lighting poles is, it is a precast concrete base. It is made of 9,500 PSI centrifugally spun concrete with 189 KSI steel cables. It's a very well-engineered foundation, and it's precast. So in the table to the upper right, what the table indicates, it indicates the weight of the precast bases, the weights of the poles, and it indicates the diameter of the hole that needs to be augured for the foundation. So it's a 30-inch diameter hole, and then it also shows that the depth is 14 feet. Now these are in compliance with the International Building Code 2018, as we would be required for permitting to meet those code standards. That's what the basis is for the foundation design. And we're meeting the wind loading as required of 115 miles per hour. So that means we're guaranteeing that up to 115 miles an hour, those poles, these foundations, and actually with most engineers, it's more conservative. Even that would be increased beyond that, but that is what we meet because that's what the code requires.
Then to Exhibit 15.
What that, did you, 14?
I was going to 15 at this point.
Okay, Exhibit 15. Just to further illustrate, this is called a shaded plot. Shaded plot. What the shaded plot shows, it shows the lighting distribution when the field is illuminated. And as you could see, it's a little difficult to see, but just as you move away from the field, the lighting itself, it diminishes very, very quickly from the field. You can see it's bright around the outside, around the, as you move away from the field, because we need to have some light beyond the field boundaries for safety. But you can see it actually looks, I think, a little clearer on this picture. You can see how dark it is around. You can see where the lighting does diminish.
There is a row of 7 boxes, squares below that show on the board that are also in the exhibit. Can you tell us what those represent?
Brightest box is area of 50-foot candles. Then it goes to 42, 34, 26, 17, 9, and 1. So you're down to 1 in very, very close proximity to the field itself. And that shows that lighting control, and that shows how we can achieve the values that we are achieving at the property line.
Mr. Zola, I had asked you, you had submitted revised plans to the township lighting consultant, and did you get a response from the township lighting consultant after his receipt of the revised plans? And can you tell us the essence of the conclusions of the township lighting consultant?
Yes. In the letter dated February 12th from the township lighting consultant, his response was that based upon his review of all of the information that had been submitted, he felt that all of the information, all the requirements had been achieved, and he felt that the lighting system that we were proposing was in conformance to the lighting ordinance requirements.
So your professional opinion based on your testimony is that what is being proposed is in conformance with the township requirements, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And is it also your professional opinion that the lights as designed as reviewed by the township lighting consultant will have no adverse impact on the surrounding area?
Yes, that is my opinion. It will have no impact on the lighting, on the surrounding areas.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I have no further questions of Mrs. Zoller. I move for the admission into the record of our exhibits A1 through A17.
Your exhibits are admitted. Board members, do you have any questions of this witness?
I do. I do have a couple of questions. So I'm going back in time to 2013 when we talked more about foot candles than I ever thought I would have in 10 lifetimes. So we're back to foot candles. So you're saying, and I just want to make sure I'm understanding what you were saying. So we had the horizontal foot candles were 0.0. We had the vertical foot candles were 0.0. So where I come from, 0.0 means 0. Is there an additional decimal point that we don't go out beyond in terms of that, or is it just you're simply saying there's no light spillage at all that was registered either horizontally or vertically in your calculations?
There should be no light spillage.
Okay. Now the field itself, you know, I can wrap my brain around the picture, and in essence you're saying we've directed the light in such a way that it doesn't go anywhere but where we want it to go, but I've also spent a lot of time with lacrosse on lighted fields, and I remember us talking, again, going back in time, it's two things. I mean, I guess I talk and say, how do you make sure that the light is still covering the full field? And you had sort of talked about some ranges, I think it was between 45 and maybe 57 on the exhibit that you provided. What type of sports can or can't then be safely played at whatever that light level is? Is there any restriction to what could be put on those fields? What, I remember us talking about lacrosse balls versus footballs versus some other things. Forgive me, I mean, that's sort of my reference point.
No, absolutely correct. No, the sports that have been projected to be done on the fields by Variety Charity can all be played on the fields. And also what we've done is we've designed the lighting level to be such that, particularly as we've heard, that there are some children, some young adults with disabilities who'll be on the fields as well. So we've made sure that the lighting is safe and is playable for all of those different users or athletes or players who would be utilizing the field.
Okay, and then my last question for you speaks to, you mentioned sort of the Musco branding, if you will, relative to these fixtures. Is there some patented technology that Musco has here, or you just simply have chosen, so let's say I went to ABC Lighting, you know, would they have a similar sort of shielded capability, or is there something unique to the Musco brand that maybe is worth noting or worth articulating on?
Yes. In all my experience with all of the LED lighting manufacturers, and that's why I showed that one illustration of that other LED lighting manufacturer, LEDs have been the hot topic for all types of lighting. And to just say you have an LED sports lighting fixture doesn't mean that you have the lighting control. The patent that Musco has is the ability to have the full cutoff fixture. That shielding is part of the Musco package. And since we've been able to utilize this type of technology, that has enabled us to be able to provide lighting to, now I've been doing this for 25 years. And we've had projects over the years that we could never light the field because of the proximity to adjacent properties, because of the very things that all municipalities are concerned about, and that is the impact to the adjacent properties. By having this full cutoff technology, we now can say that we can provide a lighting solution where we can actually block the view of the light source to the adjacent properties. And it's especially easy on this particular project because, as you heard in previous testimony, while there are adjacent residents, they're not right on top of the field. They are out at a distance. But we are able to then ensure that, because a lot of times I could not testify previously that that people would see the light source. Now we can. And many of those projects that had stalled over the last 25 years of my working with lighting technology are now, in essence, being able to move forward because now the control is better and greater than it ever has been. And Musco, what we bring is, again, like what I had testified to previously in 2014, Musco always stays on the cutting edge of technology. And back then, I testified that other lighting companies could not bid specifications where Musco parameters were the specified parameters for the project. The same holds true today. So that's what brings the Musco project, or the Musco product, to the forefront of particularly projects where lighting concerns to adjacent properties, where it becomes the best solution for those particular applications.
Okay. Steve, any questions?
Yes, sir. Thank you for the presentation. I think it was very well done. Sort of a follow-up question to Mr. Zalello's. You mentioned about the illumination and the candles. I remember well the conversation regarding the methacton lights at the football field where the opposition to the project were talking about having the light candles turned down somewhat. And I guess the question came in regarding the lacrosse ball, the football, the height of the ball that travels into the lights. And I guess I had asked the question last time at the meeting, is that possible to turn the lights down? But you just mentioned for the safety of the children, the lights should be brighter, so due to their disabilities, it'd be better to have the light candles higher, correct?
That's correct. Now,
Thank you, that's all I need to know. Thank you.
Lou, do you have any questions for the light expert?
Very satisfied with his presentation.
Okay. So Wendy, I guess you can open if anybody,
Yes, Mr. Andorn, do you have any questions of this witness? Okay, you may come and,
yeah, thank you, Mark. If you could vacate, just so we can make sure that his questions get on the,
Bob Andorn, A-N-D-O-R-N. Thank you for the presentation. Specifically, you just made a change from what I had previously seen. So there were two types of fixtures that were part of the documentation. One was a Cree fixture, and one was a TLC fixture, which I assume is a Musco fixture.
That is correct.
And Musco manufactures their own fixtures.
That is correct.
So I'll have the same question for both. I just want to go back. Musco does not own Cree, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. So, and you just changed, and so that was a Cree OSQ fixture.
OSQ.
Right? And then you just mentioned a Musco OSQ fixture.
Well, we call it the Musco OSQ fixture. It's the Cree fixture, but what Musco does is, because of our relationship with Cree, we can take that Cree OSQ fixture and warranty it along with the Musco fixture, so we can increase the warranty on that Cree fixture because of our relationship with Cree and our experience with Cree. So we actually give a better warranty than you would get simply from Cree, and that's why we call it the Musco OSQ fixture, because there's certain things that we provide that's even better than what Cree would provide directly.
And the context for my question is, I looked up the Cree fixture and was able to see the photometrics for that particular fixture. But on the Musco fixture in question, the TLC fixtures, and now I won't know if if you're using the Cree fixture, I'm assuming the photometrics would be the same whether you're selling it as a Musco fixture or not. But are photometrics available for those TLC fixtures?
No, they're not. They're proprietary. But what I can tell you is this, okay? On the field itself, the shallowest aiming angle that we have for the lighting fixture is 25 degrees down from 90 degrees to nadir, from the horizontal. So the shallowest aiming angle is at 25 degrees. The Musco is a full cutoff fixture at 20 degrees vertical. So therefore, we have 5 degrees below horizontal is where the shielding does a complete cutoff. And that's what is shown on the vertical axial candela of the photometrics of the fixture. To give you the actual photometrics of that. And that's what enables us to be able to testify to, and we will validate in the field that we have no lighting as shown at the property line.
So my comment to the board is we need to, number one, I wasn't aware that the board had contracted with its own independent lighting expert.
Mr. Andorn, I'm going to just interrupt you for a point of order. At
Okay.
this point
Okay.
is the opportunity to ask questions. You will have the opportunity of this witness,
Okay.
but you then will have an opportunity to make
Comment.
a statement.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay?
Mr. Einhorn, just to address your comment, we went through this before the Board of Supervisors with Musco. They won't divulge the proprietary information. We went round and around and around with that, and that's a trade secret that they have. You know, I guess in cross-examination with the high school football lights, that became an issue, and the answer is always proprietary. So we've been down that road before. Thank you.
Mark, do you have anything further? Okay, thank you. Now, under the township ordinance regarding exterior lighting of athletic fields, the township does have the ability to retain a lighting consultant to review this type of application and to present testimony concerning the conditional use application. So we do have here this evening Mr. John Fuller of Bowman, and I'll ask him to take a seat over there next to the court reporter. I just have two exhibits that have been marked, and I'll hand them to Mr. T10 and T11, so that we actually have out of order. Exhibit T11 is Mr. Fuller's resume that describes his experience and qualifications with regard to lighting and as a lighting expert. So, Mr. Fuller, I just would ask you to briefly describe your qualifications with respect to the area of lighting.
Sure. Can everybody hear me okay? I'm an electrical engineer, Bachelor's of Science from Penn State University. I have my professional engineering license in Pennsylvania, Delaware, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island. For the past 12 years with Bowman, formerly McMahon Associates, I've been involved with many Department of Transportation lighting projects in design, including roadway lighting jobs. I'm currently roadway lighting. I'm currently working on a tunnel lighting job on I-95 in Philadelphia. I completed tunnel lighting projects in Boston, Massachusetts, and site lighting projects as well.
Okay, thank you. And as I stated, you have been retained by the township to review the application and materials submitted by the applicant with respect to this conditional use application, which requests approval for the lighting of the athletic fields at the Variety Club. Is that right?
That's correct.
And you've had the opportunity to review the application, the lighting plans, and you've heard the testimony this evening of the applicant's consultant, Mr. Zoller. And I would just ask you if you are satisfied that the proposed lights satisfy the requirements of the township code regarding exterior lighting of athletic fields.
I agree. The testimony and plans and everything submitted is in support of and satisfied that those documents meet the requirements for it to be considered for conditional use.
And Exhibit T10 are your review letters dated January 16th and February 12th, which set forth your opinion with respect to that. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you very much. Board members, do you have any questions of Mr. Fuller?
Wendy, I do not. Steve.
You're familiar with the fixtures that the Musco people talked about today?
As noted, those are proprietary, so to the extent possible, I know that they exist. I've seen other sites with those fixtures installed.
Okay. And you're satisfied with the light system?
I am. The shielding technology is common in, basically all lighting applications. Roadway lighting has shielding, not to the extent of these lights, but it is common technology used.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Lou, any questions?
I do not.
Mr. Jonas, do you have any questions? No questions, thank you. And Mr. Andorn, do you have any questions? Okay, thank you, John. And with that, Mr. Jonas, you have completed your case. I believe the board might like to take a brief recess, perhaps to consider whether or not a decision will be announced this evening or whether this matter will be taken under advisement. So we'll go off the record for just a few moments. Go back on the record. At this point, before the board announces whether or not they're prepared to make a decision this evening, we will open up the floor to see if there's any members of the audience that have any questions with respect to the application.
Questions or public comment?
This is, you can make questions or ask questions or public comment.
Thank you.
If you could provide your name and address, please.
Karen Vavra, 10 V as in Victor, A V as in Victor, RA, 1026 Blacksmith Lane. All right, thank you guys for opening back up to public comment. I appreciate it. No doubt Variety Club is a worthy cause and is a valuable service in the community. While I can appreciate the entertainment factor of new fields, I do question the need for a lighted field. And unfortunately, Variety Club hasn't demonstrated a need for a lighted field versus a nice to have based on the usage discussed during the last two hearings. The usage and the purpose appears to be limited and, in my view, doesn't justify an exception to the current ordinance. The current lighting ordinance from 2013 reads, notwithstanding the height limitation set forth in section 150-200A, exterior lighting of athletic fields on the grounds of a public or private high school shall be permitted. Note that the ordinance does not read athletic fields in general. It states public or private high school athletic fields. The Variety Club application indicates it is a special needs, school, development center, and camp, not a high school. I recognize some neighbors around the Variety Club have given support for a lighted field. Buffers or no buffers, our current ordinance was very specifically crafted to not allow this type of lighting project. And this discussion goes beyond the Variety Club project. Allowing an exception to the ordinance for the use of lights for recreational purposes without the obvious needs such as the high demands of a high school sets a precedent for future exception requests anywhere in the township. I respectfully request the supervisors consider the future unintended consequences of granting this request. I ask that you uphold the field lighting within the township is limited to high schools only as defined within the 2013 ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Does anybody else wish to make any public comment regarding the application? Bob?
Bob Andor, Worcester. Just following up on my questioning of Mr. Zoller. I'm not a lighting expert, but looking at these photometrics allows one to understand the performance of the fixture. Not denying what he's saying, projecting, promising may be very accurate, but without any observation of documentation that that's the case. So in the case where I mentioned this Cree fixture, which is the fixture they're proposing to use on the walkways, you can look up that information and see what the photometrics are and verify the light spillage, the light quantity, the luminance that are produced by that fixture. In this particular case, we're being told it's proprietary information, and we just need to accept that information. And at what point in time, if it doesn't meet that criteria, is this board prepared to revoke that conditional use and demand that the lights be removed if, in fact, they don't meet those criteria? Again, if they do meet it, that's all we're really looking for is verification. But we have no way of verifying that information, and quite honestly, the expert that you hired would have no way of verifying that information. You're taking the light levels that they're projecting on the field and the adjacent extent to the property lines meet those criteria. And you have to take that with faith as opposed to some concrete evidence or way of verifying that's accurate. So,
Thank you, Bob. So I'm going to make a couple of comments. Actually, I'm sorry, Bert, by all means.
Bert Hines, Worcester. H-Y-N-E-S. I came here tonight hoping to hear why the light poles have to be 70 feet high. There are few trees in any buffer in this area that are 70 feet tall. Why not 50 feet? If you need to do 50 feet or 40 feet or some other number, maybe you need more lighting. So that's one observation. The other observation is this. First of all, I appreciate Mr. Zellner's presentation tonight. I found that, no pun intended, but very enlightening. The one thing that I would like to see, though, in any type of a sales presentation, would be, are there other places where we can go and see 70-foot lights using the same method, the same company? Is there something in the area that has these new lights and they've been in use and been in functional use since 2014? Is there a place we can go and see what they look like to make sure that all of the information that was presented tonight, most of the drawings and the presentations, they're computer generated. What's computer generated and what's reality may not always be the same thing. And it would be beneficial if we had some local examples where we could see these lights in operation at 70 feet to see for ourselves. That's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Bert. You're good, unless you have more to add.
Mr. DeLillo, just to address Mr. Hines' comment, maybe 10, 12 times, I think Musco presented it to the township last time around regarding the height of the lights, and that's why I addressed the safety issue. It was addressed before when the poles were that high at the high school. Why it's that high? It's the speed of the ball, it's the color of the ball, it's the diameter of the ball, everything about a ball was discussed, and the light poles went at that height. And at the last meeting, I addressed the height as well. Can it be lowered? I think the professional there said for safety issues for the children, that's the issue. We'd like to make it down to 30 or 40 feet, which I thought was possible because it won't be as competitive, I don't think, as we see at the high school level with the hitting, be it in football or any sport that partakes on the field. But I think they're looking at the safety issue of the children who could be, their sight could be impaired to begin with from physical handicaps. So I think that's the issue that sort of negates that conversation from my perspective.
Sure. So I'd like to I'm going to make a couple of comments. I'm going to start with Bob. The phrase I sometimes use, and I've stolen it, is, trust but verify. You're saying we're taking it to a degree on faith. Certainly, it would be my intention that any conditional use that we might agree to would have the condition of being able to test and verify that it actually complies. It's one thing to say, we will comply with your ordinance. It actually has to do that. So certainly that would be one of the conditions that we would want to make sure that we have in place there, that it ultimately behaves in the way, to Steve's point, we went through it. we couldn't, and Steve was on the board at that time when, you know, you were trying to get the proprietary information, and it was a dead end, for right or for wrong, and so they had to sort of take it on faith to a degree. But certainly we would want to make sure they're telling us it'll behave a particular way, and if it doesn't, we need to have a recourse to deal with that, if it ultimately doesn't do that. The other element and it gets into the weeds a little bit, is when you have a conditional use, and I might defer to Wendy a little bit on this particular point, is you heard us ask questions, does it satisfy our ordinance ultimately? So the burden of proof that they have is they need to satisfy the conditions of our ordinance as it is written. And that was why she was asking our expert, do you feel that it does that? Does it, you know, that's why we have review letters. So some of it you're sort of, there's what we'd like to see sometimes, like, you know, Bruce, hey, you made a reference to the height of you know, it would have been nice to have this or that, and, you know, that, to some degree, that I understand the question, I understand the comments. We have the guideposts that we work within is the ordinance that happens to be in place, and how we choose to interpret that, and how we choose to make that particular decision. Regarding the Variety Club itself, I mean, there's a couple of things. There's the situation's a little bit unique. There's some opportunities they've had with grant funding. There's opportunities to sort of assist that particular community in a way that I think is important. The board has talked about that. It's not always a perfect straight line with some of these things. I mean, the Variety, we got a lot of a lot of resident letters, overwhelming support from people that historically might not have supported this sort of an application in the past. We did not get a wellspring of people saying, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. Karen, to your point, you know, it's a little bit of an interpretation to, I'm trusting our experts and solicitor in saying that they meet the criteria of our ordinance, ultimately. You know, that's part of it. It's an important organization to the community. I remember sitting down with Mary Beth when she sort of took over several years ago and sort of talking through some of the challenges of fundraising and building long-range sustainability. It's been in the community for decades and decades, and I think prior to Mary Beth's arrival, it had reached sort of a somewhat stagnant and concerning position. And some of that, they came to our board. They made presentations in front of our board multiple times. They went before our planning commission to share, this is the vision we'd like to try to do, and an opportunity presented itself. And they came and said, hey, we want to be able to take advantage of this, and can you help us? You know, that was part of the conversation. Now, we're weighing that across, I mean, all the parts and pieces. You know, there's always a concern. You know, look, I sat through everyone, and you did as well, and Steve was up here, to all the hearings we had in 2013 trying to, you know, and we said yes. Like, we said yes to lights, you know, as a community, and it still took a year and a half of, and we talked more about foot candles and spillage and the night sky and all sorts of things. And, you know, I think we mostly got it right, you know, ultimately. And I think we did try to craft an ordinance a particular way that allows for certain opportunities, but tried hard not to open the floodgates to it. And here we are 10 years later, and there's an opportunity before us, and you know, we have to weigh all of those pieces. And I don't know that we'll get it right, but I feel pretty good about the presentations that we've seen and we've heard. I feel pretty good about our experts. I feel pretty good about this board and dissecting it. So we know everybody isn't going to love it, but we think, I don't want to speak for either of the other two board members, you know, I think it's a good plan. I think it's a good opportunity for us as a community.
Rick, I think you addressed the situation fairly well. Being involved for a lot of years and being a community member for almost 50 years, Variety Club struggled. You know, I remember they wanted to put a cell phone tower on their property and the township rejected it. You know, it would have been a way for them to raise money. So been difficult. A lot of the older people who used to donate Variety Club have passed on. It's tough to raise money. If you ever try to raise money for anything, I don't say everyone thinks they're going to offer and give money, but when push comes to shove, the funds don't come in. We're very fortunate that Representative Bradford, a resident of the township, and I guess the money man in Harrisburg, has taken this under, I guess, his wing and has really tried to help the Variety Club. And maybe we shouldn't take the money aspect into consideration. It's the law, but we looked at the ordinance. By the letter of the law, the ordinance, it can be interpreted that this is possible to go there. So I think this situation is tough. You know, they're in a position right now to get this money from some people willing to help them out, and it's the right time probably to, you know, look at the situation and, you know, help the neighbor, help the kids. Not many people are willing to help them, and it's a good program there, and a lot of people from our area as well as surrounding areas benefit from it. And this is the shot they have to better their campus. So,
Thank you, Steve. Lou, do you have any thoughts you'd like to share on the topic?
You said a lot, I believe. The board said a
I
lot.
tend to.
You're doing fine. I believe we're going down the right road, and I believe it's the right thing to do. So regardless of the technicalities of our ordinance or whatever, it's just the right thing to do. So I'm for it.
So, Wendy, the mechanics are always tricky for me, and to the right way. And I mean, we certainly need to have some conditions that we think, and I know we've sort of put together an order that might make some sense to maybe talk through that a little bit, and then we'll consider
Yes, so
a motion.
I have prepared a proposed order for the board's consideration that contains conditions should the board see fit to grant the conditional use approval. And before I read it, because it is somewhat wordy, I'd like to point out that the ordinance does require that the applicant post an escrow with the township in the amount of $5,000 so that the township's lighting consultant can essentially test the lights in conjunction with the applicant's lighting consultant to confirm that they do in fact comply with the requirements of the ordinance. That is in our ordinance. And then the ordinance also provides that light readings shall be taken within 1 year of the initial testing. So that is a provision that is in your ordinance, and it would be something that would be required here. So I will go ahead and just read the suggested order and conditions, and then the board can determine if they feel it's appropriate. So the order would provide that the application of the Variety Children's Charity of Delaware Valley for conditional use approval is granted subject to the following conditions. The first condition would be that the development and use of the illuminated facility permitted by conditional use shall be consistent with the testimony and exhibits submitted to the Board of Supervisors at the public hearings on January 17th and February 21st. The next condition would be that the use of the illuminated facility shall be primarily for the use of the applicant's special needs camp, while also being available for rental and community use pursuant to Section 150, 11C2B of the ordinance. The third condition, all activities or events proposed for the illuminated facility shall be scheduled so that they shall be expected to end no later than 9 p.m. prevailing time Monday through Thursday, and no later than 10 p.m. prevailing time Friday and Saturday. No use of the lights shall be permitted on Sundays. An additional half hour of lighting at a reduced intensity shall be permitted after the conclusion of an activity or event to allow for the safe exit of participants and spectators from the premises and the cleanup of the field and surrounding areas. Number 4, the illuminated facility shall not be lighted in the early morning for practices or other permitted activities. The illuminated facility shall not be lighted during any time when no activity is taking place on the field or when an activity can be conducted safely in natural light. Number 5, consistent with section 150-200B9 of the zoning ordinance, the township's independent lighting consultant, Bowman, shall conduct a post-installation system performance evaluation to ensure that performance of the illumination complies with the requirements of section 150-200B9. The applicant shall deposit an escrow with the township in the amount of $5,000 to provide for the township's independent lighting professionals evaluation. Number 6, the illuminated facility shall in all respects comply with the provisions of section 150-200B of the zoning ordinance. And number 7, nothing in this decision in order would be construed as either an express or implied waiver of any provisions of any applicable ordinances of the township, and the applicant shall be required to comply with all applicable codes, regulations, and ordinances. So that would be the proposed order and conditions, if you see fit
Right.
to adopt it.
Thank you, Wendy. Does anyone have any other thoughts that they want to share before I look to open it up to a motion?
Pull the trigger, Rick.
Okay. Then I'll entertain a motion if somebody would like to make a motion.
So we're going to make a motion to approve a conditional use application number.
Good question. Wendy, can you make sure we get the right?
CUA 2023-01 of the Variety, the Children's Charity of the Delaware Valley.
Is that correct? Did we get the right numbers?
Yes, that is correct. Thank you.
And I will second that motion.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any public comment regarding the motion that's on the floor? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Aye. Motion passes.
Okay, that concludes the conditional use hearing. The order will be signed by the board and circulated to the applicant in due course. So at this point, the conditional use hearing is closed. We are off the record with regard to that. We will now reopen the public meeting of the supervisors and continue with the agenda.
Bear with me 1 second. Thank you, Wendy. So let me get myself back in place here. So next we come up to other business, and under other business we have the waiver of land development for some organization called the Variety Club. Do you know them, Mark? Are you familiar with them at all?
So do we want to, Mark, if you'd like to maybe make an introduction regarding this, and we'll then ask the engineers for input here?
Sure. Just when you thought it was safe, I'm back. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for the granting of the conditional use application. We're here tonight requesting a waiver with certain expected conditions of land development with regard to the Phase 1 to Phase 2 of the sports fields that you heard earlier this evening during the conditional use application. We have a brief presentation to make through Mr. Boker, who you've heard before, and he's going to talk about, give the overview, the interaction with the township consultants, including CKS, and to address certain key aspects, again, in very summary form, in terms of parking, stormwater management, and landscaping. So our request is, this board has said it certainly very well in terms of this organization and why we think some consideration should be given to the grant of a land development subject to certain conditions that we would certainly expect. Mr. Boker?
So as Mark mentioned, we're asking for a waiver of land development. That does not relieve us of providing adequate stormwater management, adequate parking facilities, adequate E&S controls. Those are all being reviewed by your township consultants, as well as we have to acquire an MPDS permit for this project and adhere to all those regulations as well with respect to stormwater management and erosion and sediment control. This project, as talked about earlier tonight, is in 2 phases. The first phase is just the construction of the multi-purpose synthetic turf field that you've seen here. That includes a small walk around the entirety of the field for spectators to watch wherever they would like. The bleacher pads that we discussed that would hold a total of 84 spectators. And just to be honest, that's really cramming them in there. That's giving each person 18 inches of bench space. So that's the maximum number that these bleachers can hold. I myself probably take more than a little more than 18 inches. In addition to that, we would have a connecting walkway from the back of the field to existing walks into the campus for ADA accessibility and to connect it to the rest of the campus. For phase 1, we plan to utilize existing parking facilities on site. With any club or outside organization that uses facilities at Variety Club, they enter into an agreement with the club. And in that agreement, they'll designate where they can park on site. I have a parking exhibit. I think you were handed a...
Mr. Boker, could I ask that you just speak into the microphone for the benefit of anybody who watches the recording after the fact? Thank you.
You hear me well enough if I stand so I can... So I think earlier tonight you were handed a small handout that showed this large plan that I have behind me. And on that plan, we designate certain areas of parking of the existing facility on site. Parking area A has 50 spaces. Parking area B, 24 spaces. Parking area C has 5 standard spaces as well as 6 accessible spaces for a total of 85 spaces available on site. And that's just the spaces that we looked at in close proximity to the field that these groups would be using. There are a dozen or so other spaces on site that Variety can use for any functions that they may have that conflict with the use of the field by other organizations. These activities typically involve some staff, and the kids are being dropped off, so they're not occupying parking spaces while those activities, Variety's own activities, are undergoing. So we looked at parking a couple different ways. Your ordinance doesn't have a specific requirement for outdoor seating facilities, but if you look at the stadium seating requirement, that I believe is 1 per every 3 seats. With a total 84, you would require 28 spaces. As mentioned, we have several areas available for a total of 85 spaces, so there's more than adequate enough parking on site. Another way we looked at it is if ITE, which is Transportation Authority, has a standard for soccer complexes and tournaments. How many spaces are you going to need when you have these tournaments, when you take into account employees, referees, spectators, and they require 60 spaces per field. So with 1 field, we still have more than adequate space on site if that was to host a tournament. I personally don't see many tournaments with just 1 field. Usually you need multiple fields and oftentimes more than the 2 that we'll have available. Then I can go into phase 2, and I'll just pull up that plan so you can see that. Phase 2 will involve, as mentioned earlier, the construction of a baseball field to the west of the field in phase 1. The only lit field will be the phase 1 field. And to the southeast of the multipurpose synthetic turf field would be another natural grass soccer or multi-purpose field. In between those two fields, again, we have a field of 96 parking spaces that would provide adequate parking with some overflow on site if they were to host a tournament. Looking at the field sizes, a tournament would probably only involve the two fields. You can't fit a full-size soccer field the size of the two other fields on the baseball field. You need safety run out, the fence, and the location the pitcher's mound do not allow you to have a full-size field on that. However, if you did host a tournament with the two fields and looked at the 60 spaces for that use per field, that'd be 120 spaces. With the addition of the 96 spaces newly constructed, we would have a total of 181 parking spaces on site between the new spaces and the ones previously used on site. So in our opinion, there's more than adequate enough parking on site, and we don't see the need for any on-road parking or other parking on site. With this, as mentioned, there will be a lot of stormwater management. Phase 1 has a stormwater management basin directly underneath the field, and we utilize several other basins throughout the site, both subsurface and surface basins, to achieve the required stormwater management, both volume and rate control on site. I think that was a brief introduction. Phase 2 would also include, in addition to the fields, a small support building for bathrooms and storage facilities of equipment that I did not mention.
Landscaping?
Landscaping would include augmenting the already existing buffer along the western boundary, following down around the southern boundary, along Pot Shop Road and North Trooper Road as well.
Thank you, Mr. Boker.
Okay, so I'm going to start up here and then get down to the weeds as we need to. I think there's 2 or 3 concerns, with any. So when we talk about a waiver of land development, I would sort of qualify it to say it would be a partial waiver of land development, just on the semantics. So stormwater management is one of them, certainly, of concern. We've talked a little bit about the parking. One of the major concern that the board has is street parking. So you have an event and sort of what's the backup plan when more shows up than you envision, and where do those cars happen to go? And I am skewed with lacrosse because I've had lacrosse tournaments for the last 10 years with my younger son, and if you build it, they will come. You wind up with cars to the moon, and there's a concern, like Pot Shop Road cannot have street parking under any circumstances at all, and we don't know how to handle that exactly, other than making sure it doesn't happen ultimately. So there is I understand sort of meeting the ordinance, and then there's sort of if we've ever attended a soccer tournament or a lacrosse tournament and what tends to show up, just making sure maybe there's a backup plan to be able to accommodate more, even if there isn't a parking lot, like a lot of them do grass parking. Steve, I know you could maybe speak to this a little bit with Marymead, where you open up areas to accommodate that. So there's a little bit of parking concern. And then there's just sort of the general, do we make sure we cross every T and dot every I? I know John put together a review letter that had sort of, a lot of granularity to it, and we just have a generic, we want to make sure that we're protecting ourselves and having enough oversight to anything that might be taking place, that it isn't just, here you go and let's hope for the best, that we want to make sure that we have all the pieces in place so that you can move quickly to meet deadlines, but we can still be satisfied that we've had appropriate oversight. I don't know, does that, and I'll turn to my board members to sort of add in if there were other specific areas of concern before we maybe get into some of the granularity of making sure what might or might not work here. Did you want to add anything? I know.
The biggest concern is the parking, and street parking is like not a great idea. So my question to you is, if you have and you're adding 96 spots, you're going to have 181 proposed total, correct? is there any way that you can like have like phase 3 in your head that, what if this doesn't work and you have a special event where you bust in a lot of people or a lot of people show up? Is there any room for additional parking that could be incorporated later at a date?
So the Variety Club has historically used other lawn areas for overflow parking for extreme events. So that is still there, and we're only touching a portion of this site. There is another portion just south of the natural grass multi-purpose field if we had to, or if they had to. They could install additional parking if that overflow lawn parking wasn't sufficient for that extreme event.
I think Mr. Lilello took my line, build it and they'll come. I think the light's one thing, but I think our biggest concern is a safety issue for the people traveling the roads of Worcester on those pot shop as well as Trooper. And as Mr. Betts said, as long as you have a plan in place to cover the parking in case it happens, we're sort of protecting ourselves, as you said, in the conditional use minutes from the presentations that have been made that parking will not be an issue. And as long as we have that understanding that if cars are parked on it, we have the power to make changes rather quickly, because we will get the calls from township residents, because it's just a dangerous road. You guys all know the road there coming each way. There's no room really for two. It's really tough for 2 cars to traverse at any one time, especially in the evening. So it's just the parking. As long as that's taken care of, I have no problem. Thank you.
So I'm going to shift to John Everett a little bit. I'm going to ask you, John, to chime in a little bit. So I know some of the consternation was John's most recent review letter had a few items on it, and we want to make sure, maybe John, you could speak to that at a little bit as well. I mean, we want to get to a spot where there's comfort from our side that we're protected, but we're not putting an unnecessary and onerous burden in place either. I mean, we need to find if there's a spot there that works. So, John, maybe you could talk to the review letter a little bit more and just sort of see if we can get some consensus on that.
So I guess my first question is there any items that you will not comply with, that you can't comply with in my review letter?
No, there are not.
The one question that I stated was posting financial security for stormwater management and sanitary sewer improvements. Is there any issues with doing that?
I think we would just like to do it in terms of the phases, and not, if we're just phase 1, not to do an escrow relating to phase 2, which has yet to come. So I think
I think the township would be acceptable to that the phase 2 improvements would have to be posted prior to, the construction of phase 2. As long as phase 1 is posted, you could start construction at that time.
that would be acceptable to the applicant.
And then, Michael, do you want to speak to the waiver request, the specific waiver request that you're asking for other than the waiver of land development?
Sure. So in John's letter, he lists the waivers that we had previously noted on our plan. I can run through them if you would like. In addition to those, he did note one requirement in the letter that we would ask for a waiver for, and that's a partial waiver of one section of the code that requires that you use reinforced concrete pipe and at least 18 inches in diameter. That material and that size is really more appropriate with like roadway improvements. All our infrastructure is on site, and in discussing that with John, that is something the township typically entertains with projects.
It will be privately owned, so it's not the responsibility of the township.
Thank you, John.
So would you like us to run through the other waivers, or?
Yeah, I'd like you to run through because there's a couple that we're more thinking defer versus waiver.
I'll just go through his letter in that order. So the first one we talked about was, I guess, would be a partial waiver of land development. The second one, Section 130.16C 1A6, did not provide the required minimum cartway width of 38 feet and 40 feet along Pot Shop Road and North Trooper Road, respectively. We're asking to keep, not burden them with those improvements, so it would be consistent with what's out there today. Section 130-18A, to not provide sidewalk along site frontages of Pot Shop Road, North Trooper Road, and Valley Forge. Again, there's no sidewalk currently within the vicinity of this proposed project, and that's why we're asking for a waiver. Section 130-18B, to not provide curbing along the site frontages of Pot Shop Road, North Trooper Road, and Valley Forge Road. Again, there's no curbing that currently exists within the vicinity of this project along those roadways. Section 130-28G5, to not provide a softening buffer along Pot Shop Road and North Trooper Road. The site is somewhat elevated from those roadways, and we are providing plantings along those roadways. By no particular, our landscape architect felt that providing that buffer would really take away from the character of those roadways. With the improvements that we're placing adjacent to Pot Shop Road, you're really going to retain that vista because all you have is a natural grass field, and they felt adding those would really take away from that current vista. Section 130-28G5, to not provide additional buffer plantings along a portion of the western boundary where there is an existing vegetated buffer. Again, that's just a partial waiver to kind of take credit for that existing buffer that's already there on site along those boundary lines. And then the additional waiver that I mentioned regarding the pipe type and size.
Gotcha. So I think where we were thinking deferment is on the sidewalks and the curbing, something that we've done in other scenarios is in essence, if there is a future need to do that, we want to be able to revisit that. Now we understand there's no sidewalk or curbing in place, but we've had other developments where you might wind up having a future decision. We want to be able to circle back to that at some future date if that became necessary. If I'm saying that correctly, Wendy, that's the thought process on that. John, maybe you could speak to the plantings a little bit. I know there's obviously a lot of vegetation and stuff that's over there. I know that wasn't a huge concern for us, but I would love your thoughts on that as well.
No, so it's really partial waivers, and it's almost a distinction between a softening buffer and a shielding buffer almost. The existing vegetation, CKS feels that it's sufficient. We had our registered landscape architect take a look at it as well, and they concurred with Mr. Boker's request for a waiver.
Gotcha. Guys, were there any concerns that either of you had regarding any of the waivers? I know we talked about them a bit, and again, you start to get a little dizzy when you start talking about all these to make sure we're covering the right stuff. But I want to make sure that you both have an opportunity to sort of chime in on that as well.
I'm fine with it.
So I'm going to go back and ask you again, in terms of John's most recent review letter, you're comfortable that you'll be able to comply with everything and we're not putting an unnecessary burden on you that we're going to get a question later that says, gee, we couldn't do X, Y, or Z from the letter. I mean, I think John tried to, articulate everything as crisply as he could, and my sense is a lot of these things are administrative in nature and just making sure that plans get updated and documents get recorded and that sort of stuff. And I just want to make sure I hear that one more time, that there isn't going to be a comeback later that says, turns out we can't do page 3. That's a little bit, that would be concerning.
That would have to go in front of the board.
No, we've been through them. I reviewed them with John, and we're more than halfway through making a revision, so I'm confident. With the exception of what we discussed tonight with the waivers and how the escrow is posted, we're fine with the letter.
Yeah, I mean, I hope you understand, we can't waive the escrow. I mean, we can work with you, obviously, but we can't waive that. I mean, that's not, I think that's what we sort of felt, phase 1, phase 2, I think that's certainly manageable, but we can't just remove it from, we need to be somewhat consistent with when we have done these with other projects in the past, and we want to make sure there's some consistency to how we go about that.
We're not asking for a waiver of the escrows, just to phase them.
Okay. Perfect. Any questions? Any questions?
Well, I'm satisfied.
Okay, so what are the mechanics of what you need, Wendy, and how it probably makes sense, you were saying, to do this as a resolution of some sort? And again, I want to use the right language.
Yes, so I have prepared a proposed resolution. I will read that, and then I don't know if at some point you want to open up the floor for any questions from the public. But I will go ahead and read the proposed resolution. And this would be a resolution to grant a limited waiver of land development with regard to the applicant's property at 2950 Pot Shop Road. Would provide that the applicant is granted a limited waiver of the land development process regarding the plan, subject to the following conditions. So the conditions would be compliance with the CKS Engineers Review Letter dated February 13th, 2024, compliance with the Bowman Traffic Review Letter dated February 14th, 2024, a development agreement providing for the posting of financial security attendant to the stormwater management and sanitary sewer improvements in form satisfactory to the township solicitor and engineer must be executed prior to recording the plan. The stormwater management agreement in form satisfactory to the township solicitor and engineer must be executed prior to recording the plan. There should be no parking along road frontages. The township shall retain the ability to require that the applicant take steps to remediate parking problems identified by the township. Remediation steps may include, by way of example, a requirement to install additional parking facilities, a restriction on the number of games which the facility may host in a day, or the staggering of games at the facility. And then the waivers or deferrals are as follows. A waiver from section 130-16B1A6 to not provide a minimum cartway of 38 feet and 40 feet along Pot Shop and North Trooper Roads, respectively. A deferral with respect to sidewalk along the site frontages of Pot Shop Road, North Trooper Road, and Valley Forge Road until such time as required by the township. A deferral of section 130-18B with respect to curbing along the site frontages of Pot Shop, North Trooper Road, and Valley Forge Roads until such time as required by the township. A waiver of section 130-28G5 to not provide a softening buffer along Pot Shop Road and North Trooper Road, and a waiver of section 130-28G5 with regard to additional buffer plantings along a portion of the western boundary where there is an existing vegetative buffer. And finally, a waiver of the section 129-18, 2 and 3 of the stormwater management to allow piping of material consisting of HDPE less than 15 inches. So that would be the proposed conditions along with the waivers or deferrals.
Thank you, Wendy. So I'm going to say we would open it up to public comment maybe before we decide to make a motion. Is that a reasonable? Okay, so does anybody have any public comment regarding the waiver of land development as we've discussed? There's no motion on the floor yet. Just want to make sure if anybody in the audience has any comments they would like to add at this point. Okay, seeing none, then I will turn to a board member. If somebody would like to make a motion, I will entertain one.
I'll make a motion that we accept the presentation of Wendy as far as the waiver.
So how about a waiver of land developed pursuant to the terms and conditions that Wendy has outlined in her resolution? Does that work?
This would be 2024-07.
Okay.
So I'll make the motion to approve the waiver 2024-7.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any public comment regarding the motion on the floor? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes.
Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate all your patience. We did all right. We got past 9 o'clock, but didn't get to 10, so that's a good thing. So folks, we are still sort of wrapping up the meeting. I would just ask, does any board member have any other business they wish to bring before the board tonight?
Just in regards to Mr. Andorn, as far as the investigation, or if we can't resolve this with his meeting, that we bring it outside.
So yeah, you and I will have to talk about how we figure that out.
I just want support from either board member or both to identify that, was it presented, was it presentation, for bookkeeping, something. I just want a final of this so we can put this away.
What I can promise you is I will work with you to try to figure out.
Thank you.
Whatever. I don't know that I'll have an answer, but I will work with you.
I think we need to resolve the answer.
So I'm willing to do that. Anything on your side, Steve?
No, sir.
All right. Motion to adjourn.